In this episode, we'll consider whether Tesla shareholders voting to reinstate a pay package presently worth over $40 billion to Elon Musk is indicative of things going very well at Tesla or potentially indicative of things going wrong. And also whether it's indicative of things going right or wrong in our society more generally. And later on, we'll react to the story of a Texas Republican who won a school board seat to fight indoctrination that she later found out wasn't there. And we'll also look at the research, this new research that suggests that any amount of alcohol for you is apparently bad for you. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and riding shotgun with me today is a man who is exactly what you're looking for. If you're a podcast listener and you don't want to worry about an executive producer trying to be all in the video, all on the record, dancing, and that's Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to show the people why they don't need a bad boy?
Of course. Right. And those guys don't beat up their women either, by the way. The ones I roll with anyway.
There you go.
That's a different topic for a different discussion.
Different topic for a different day.
We'll bring it up when we discuss the alcohol later in the show.
Hey, all right. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you hit subscribe and like on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. And we're recording this on June 18th, 2024. And Tunde, last week we saw Tesla shareholders vote to reinstate a pay package for Elon Musk that's worth, as of the stock price right now, Tesla stock price over $40 billion. And this is after a judge, a Delaware court judge, ruled in a shareholder lawsuit, so a lawsuit that was brought by shareholders, that Musk was not entitled to this pay package. Now, the shareholder lawsuit argued that the Tesla board is essentially controlled by Musk, so the negotiations for this package, which happened a while back, just weren't legitimate negotiations. And the judge agreed. But now we have a shareholder vote where the shareholders of Tesla voted by around a 3-to-1 margin that they want Musk to have the package. But this still has to go back to the judge and so forth to see if it'll be reinstated or if they'll take additional efforts to try to get this package to them. But Tunde, what do you make of all these machinations, surrounding the Musk pay package and this substantial, pay package, and also in the shareholder vote to move it forward? And do you think, we'll get to this as well. What do you think this means about, or what do you take away as far as what this means about the trajectory that Tesla's on? Good trajectory, bad trajectory, concerning, or whatnot?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting set of facts, let's put it that way, because at first notice, the headline is huge, right? I mean, I think the number I saw could be as high as 56 billion.
The share price in like January, it was up to like 56 billion. And then now the share price where it is now, the shares dropped since then. So because it's a pay package based on stock, so forth.
That's what I was going to say. So depending on what the share price is doing will affect the pay package of that size.
Billions of dollars, apparently.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, which on its own is interesting, right? Because it's also telling us the entire compensation isn't a cash compensation, that this compensation is, still dependent on what investors generally think about the direction of Tesla. And that's what I mean by this is more complex once you look into it than it appeared on the surface when just looking at headlines, which, wow, isn't that something profound for our day and age today? And so what I mean by that is, when I first saw the first headlines in the last few months, or the one in January when the judge in Delaware rejected the initial attempt at this, it just looked like, oh, wow, this guy wanted to be paid $56 billion. Wow, that seems almost like a pig trying to eat too much out of the trough. Yeah. So in that sense, my initial reaction was like,
pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
Yeah. And so my initial reaction was kind of that feeling like, well, that's a big pay package for almost any company, even something the size of Tesla. But then again, as we're talking, looking into the nuances of it, the amount of time, I know there's been some stuff going on as long as 5 years where they've been back and forth on some of this stuff. It doesn't look as, hog potentially being slaughtered as I once thought. And then the other thing that I think will be fun in our discussion today is breaking down things like this isn't illegal. There's nothing that says this can't be done. And if the shareholders accepted it, then who am I to say that this shouldn't happen? But yet there's something that still feels weird about somebody getting paid that much. So it's one of those things that I think it's
Well,
and not to go on a different tangent, and then I'll pass it back. It's like when you find out that a Supreme Court justice is flying the American flag upside down. That's not illegal, but it's just something that doesn't sit right with that.
well, it's interesting that you say that you talk about kind of your progression, because to me, what that indicates more than anything is that because it started off so high, then once you got some kind of like some more information about it, it was like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not that bad. But it still is. No matter if you go look at the numbers and you compare like what this pay package would represent compared to other car companies, or other large companies, it still is it's completely blows out of the water any pay package.
I mean, this is
of any
historic.
CEO of an established company. Now, I'm not going to get into if something's a pure startup, because that's a different phase of a company and so forth. But to me, this is like seeing all this. This is like a big red flag that Tesla is in. It potentially has some trouble going on here, because the case to be made here, and this is the case made by Elon Musk, is that, hey, well, if you're not going to give me this kind of pay package, then maybe I'll put some of my energy and attention and some of the things I'm coming up with somewhere else, with one of my other companies and so forth, which is very interesting. And then how the stockholders recognize that, like, hey, that means that our investment in this stock now may be put in jeopardy. What I'm saying with that basically is that what this seems to reveal is that the stock price for Tesla, which admittedly trades much higher than, like, from a price to earnings ratio than traditional car companies, or almost any company out there, is that some of that is, and maybe a substantial portion of that is inflation based on, or is a premium based on the fact that they're associated with Musk, and people who are investing like the company be associated with Musk. So there's something to be said that, hey, just having Musk around is like, that's good for the company's share price. Now, that doesn't mean it's good for the business overall, or that it's that much better for the business, but it just makes makes people feel good about it. That seems like that's a lot of eggs. Like, this is a business that has to sell stuff to make money. Like, that's a lot of eggs in one basket to say, hey, if this guy goes away, or if we don't have this guy, we're worried that our stock price might drop by 30%. And it's like, well, hold up. Like, shouldn't your cars and the innovation that you have going on be the stuff that people are buying the stock for, not just the fact that you guys are associated with Elon Musk? So 20 years in, the company's founded in 2003. Like, I get that in the first 5 years, like, oh yeah, because we have our guy here, you can trust us. But the company has a pretty long runway now of things it's supposed to be doing and doing well, and trajectory. I know the truck they introduced didn't do well, and there'd be some kinks in the armor there. But I'm just like, man, if you're 20 years in and you're still dependent on who the CEO is for your company being prestigious and to have this inflated stock value, then you may be in trouble. By now, you should be, like, kind of out of the nest and, flying on your own a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you on that sentiment. I think some of the arguments I've heard have been, comparing him to Michael Jordan, and just saying that, Michael Jordan was irreplaceable on the Bulls, and something like his pay package in his last season of 97-98, when he made $33 million in one season, Michael Jordan, that was unheard of, I remember, at the time. And that was kind of the argument is, well, he's Michael Jordan. And so I think that, that might be true for Michael Jordan.
The only thing that's different than that, though, is that Michael Jordan's presence directly led to more wins and championships.
No, and that's where I'm going with it, is that in athletics, whether it's, a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady or a Michael Jordan or whoever, that they are such a star and so much better than everyone else in that sport or that league. That's a little bit easier to kind of see and understand than the CEO of a large company, like you said, not a startup anymore, but a mature company, being totally irreplaceable look, the fact that if you have a company as big as Tesla that has a market cap somewhere around 500 to 600 billion, last year in 23, looks like their gross revenue was 96 billion. So they're a real company. They're not a startup anymore. And they have retained earnings and all that stuff now. So if you're at that level and you still got to have one man only, on a serious note,
concern.
Yeah, that's like idolatry. That's like a dictatorship. And I'm not saying that, I want to be very clear here. I'm not blaming Elon Musk for being a dictator or anything like that. What I'm saying is, this is how I would start thinking is that, okay, so this must be people that must want to worship an individual versus, like you said, the process of the company. And the example I keep thinking of is Steve Jobs with Apple.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs unfortunately died of cancer, so I don't want to make any light of that. But the idea is that he was very instrumental to Apple. He was the founder. He was a guy like Musk that was seen as a dynamic individual that himself,
driving the creativity of the company.
He was driving the engineers. He just like Musk, he developed the products and he was in there. He was in the trenches making sure that the iPhone was designed a certain way. Even the interior of the phone had to look a certain way, just like Musk is with the Cybertruck, very hands-on, and other projects of his. But when Steve Jobs passed, the company didn't collapse. It was, the board picked Tim Cook to be the CEO, and he seems to have done a fine job. And Apple has only grown since Mr. Jobs has passed. And we could say the same with other big companies like Microsoft. Bill Gates was the face for so long. And he stepped down, and they seem to be doing great. And the same with Google, with Sergey Brin, and so
arguably that's part of the job of the CEO is to not just say everything is built around me, but to kind of build out an infrastructure that can continue to survive and thrive if they're there or not. And so it seems like Musk hasn't built that. It seems like he's built something that only kind of operates. And he's like, it's like a heliocentric type of thing. Like it only operates while he's sitting there in the middle, and the shareholders are worried to the tune of approving this, this share package. And this was the case he made. I'm not like making this up. His case to the shareholders that, hey, maybe I'll spend a little less time here if you're not going to do this for me, which seems to be a breach of fiduciary duty, but unless he just steps down. But no, I'm not going to get into that stuff. But it like I said, to me, it just seemed like a red flag. Like
mob mentality. It'd be ashamed if your pizzeria burned down if you didn't pay me, what I want right now.
Not even mob. It's kind of like the quiet quitting thing. He's like, hey, well, it'd be a shame if I didn't come tomorrow for work.
Yeah, if I didn't show up for work tomorrow, I'd be ashamed.
I'll be over at SpaceX chilling if you don't give me this money. But
that also says a lot about the type of leader, right? I mean, he's the type of leader that's threatening people that he's going to destroy something potentially if he doesn't get his way. And so, and that's my point, is saying that I want to be nuanced here with what I'm saying is that he has every right to be paid that much as long as the shareholders vote and they want to take 50% of the last year's revenue and pay him one time with that. That's their right to do it. I'm not here to stop that.
Yeah, to dilute their own shares, Well, no, but to dilute their own shares, to give him more and all that.
Issuing more shares to him. Exactly. So they want to do that. They can do that. What I'm just saying is that, if you look at other large corporations that have been successful, like Tesla has been successful up till now, that started by a founder who was a dynamic person who did create something special and showed the world that this vision can be realized and that it can be part of our economy. That's what I mean. The iPhone, Windows 95, and all the way to Windows now, right? All these different companies that we know,
like I said, Google examples. If you look over the last 100 years or so, there's infinite examples of that dynamic person that starts the company. But you used a good word when you're talking about, like, at a certain point, the company has to mature where it's not centered completely around that person. It's not beholden to this
one person.
Yeah,
and that's what I think too. I mean, as I say it,
it has to do that if it's going to survive and thrive, over time.
Yeah.
But I want to get to the second part of this because we want to keep the conversation moving. What about from a societal standpoint? Like, I can confidently say that something like this would never happen in FDR's America. That's just the way that the American system was set up at the time. Not that it would have been illegal, but the way that the tax code was set up was encouraged, or it discouraged this type of thing, because essentially it discouraged it with tax policy. Because if you tried to do this, it would end up blowing up in your face. You'd end up giving most, if not all, the money to the government anyway. So you just wouldn't behave like this because, the way the taxes were set up. So from a societal standpoint, and we're not in that America anymore, by the way. We're well beyond the whole thing of, like trying to keep wealth disparity under control, but what do you see from an America standpoint that he would that he would push this out there publicly and everything like that? You got other CEOs of major companies making, 50 million, 60 million. This dude's like, give me, 50 billion.
I think that's a great way to kind of set up the question, which is, that's what I say, it's about leadership. What does it say about him? And I
But
don't.
also, what does it say about us that he
No,
knows
I get
he
it.
can do
That's
that
where
without us being like, what the world?
I'm gonna unpack it. But and so I want to be clear that this isn't a personal knock on Elon Musk. Like, he doesn't have the right to do this. And this is one thing that I think we got to really kind of nuance this out, because I watched his interview with Don Lemon, and it was interesting because Don Lemon was just questioning him, normal questions, saying, for you're supporting sometimes on the X, Twitter, anti-Semitic statements, and you tend to give it thumbs up and like it and retweet it and all this stuff. And he kept saying to Don Lemon, like, well, that's not illegal. That's freedom of speech. I have a right to do it. And Don Lemon was trying to get in his mind, like, no one's saying it's illegal, dude. What I'm questioning is, you are now a role model in a sense, almost like a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan. People look up to you. So you have a certain responsibility as an influencer to maybe not promote this type of antisocial behavior like anti-Semitism, right?
Tunde, I was wondering if you were going to go into, why don't you just shut up and design or shut up and engineer?
Why don't you shut up? Yeah. Why don't you shut up and get your technical drawings out? Yeah. So for the audience that might not get that, an illusion to shut up.
That's the shut up and dribble thing. But
yeah, but so the thing is, I think it's a similar thing here where someone like me or you could look from the outside and say, hey, man, don't you think as a leader, like, of course you can get paid $50 billion. But again, like we talk about a pig at a trough, like that just kind of looks out of whack to the society. And what's the message we're sending to maybe other people that, look up to you, that are starting companies that, maybe they shouldn't just raid the company like this, or what about blah, 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 right? And he'd probably look at you and say, well, it's not illegal. I have a right to do it. And I think there's a lot of that conversation in our country right now about, well, it's not illegal, or is it? And I think that's where it's like, well, maybe this, to answer your question more directly, maybe this is what it looks like when our norms have been disrupted, right? Yeah. And that's what I mean. I'm not blaming that just on one facet of our society, because we could say norms have been disrupted on political side, maybe some legal stuff. This is an example of the business norms. And I agree with you, because as an example, I just wanted to look at an old blue chip company. So I looked at Coca-Cola, and they have a market cap or a size of about 270 billion. And as of when I looked like a day ago with the share price, their revenue last year was 45 billion. And I thought to myself, like, imagine if the CEO of Coca-Cola said, I deserve to be paid half of last year's revenue. Because if Tesla did $96 billion last year and this guy's getting 50 billion, then it would be equivalent to the CEO of Coca-Cola, that if they did 45 billion, that he gets maybe 22 or 23 billion in pay this year. And I think most of us from the outside of that community would look and say, how the hell is the CEO of Coke getting $22 billion? And that's what I mean. But because Elon Musk has this cult of personality, I think it's one of those where, and as we see this with other people in our society today who also have a cult of personality, when they do something that bends the norms a bit, there's actually a certain percentage of us in the public in America that'll be like, yeah, he got his, or he stuck it to somebody. Now, I don't know there's nobody here that Elon Musk really stuck it to, unless somebody thinks people like you and I talking about it with a little bit of discomfort means he got a win, which there are people who, get satisfied when people are uncomfortable with something that Elon Musk did personally. So that's what I mean is, I think he gets away with this a little bit more because of who he is and the era that we're in now in our culture and our discourse.
Well, no, I mean, I think that, and I've said this to you before, I think we're full-fledged going into another Gilded Age. So, I mean, I think this is just indicative of that. I don't think
we're going into. I think we've been in it.
We're in it. Yeah. Now, the idea that he would do this, now I look at it more from a societal standpoint. There are always going to be people who push the limit or go over lines and stuff like that. So as far as norms go, if you're not going to have a tax code and corporate, setups that discourage certain types of behavior, then people will do it. If you don't have rules against dumping poison in lakes, companies will do it. We know this, we have those rules because companies did it before those rules were there. So expecting everyone to think of a greater good or, what's good for society is just you're not going to get very far with that kind of mentality. So to me, this isn't, from the Musk standpoint, it doesn't bother me. This is just the kind of person that he is, so it was okay. Like whatever is if he can get away with it, so to speak, and not get away with it legally, but get away with it. Like if you take more than $10 billion in a year, or, whatever it is, $5 billion in a year, you get hit with some high tax, he wouldn't do it. And if there's not that, then he would. And so that's more, again, about him. What's interesting to me is just from a societal standpoint, like, and part of this is obviously the way that messaging is presented to us, and a lot of it is intentional. But it amazes me, like, just when I grew up and learned about kind of like if you go back to the Roaring '20s and and then all that, the lack of regulation and all that, then you go into the Great Depression and kind of the lessons that were learned, and then you have like class solidarity to some degree in the '50s and '60s, and people look back. It's interesting to me. People look back at the '50s like, oh man, that was just an amazing time, social fabric and family and all that, one earner households. But they never connect the idea that it's like, okay, yeah, back in the '50s, the average CEO made 20 times the average worker. Whereas in 2023, the average CEO makes 200 times the average worker. And it's like, well, there's some reason, there's a connection to that, like the type of society that you formulate when you create this gilded type of class, and then you have everybody else just fighting over scraps that are increasingly shrinking, and then you throw in inflation and stuff like that. So the inability from a working class standpoint to have any concept of, hey, how society decides to share the spoils that are being created. There's productivity all around in society. Are those all going to accumulate at the top and just be directed at the top, or does everybody get to eat a little bit off of that? And which has other benefits as well, which again are all lessons we've learned, in the last 180 years. But that disconnect, the fact that those lessons have been lost, some of that's just living memory type of stuff. Like the idea that things can be more equitable, still capitalist, still market-based, but more equitable, seems to just going to be completely lost on people now. Like it's just, because 200 to 1, Elon Musk laughs at 200 to 1 in terms of some ratio. Like the average Tesla worker, he's thousands and thousands more than they are with this kind of pay package. And so that, to me, again, I look at more society and like, man, this is not something that people would much rather, like get mad about. As we're going to talk on our second topic, people would much rather spend their time getting mad about something that doesn't even exist than seeing something like this and being like, like, oh my God, how did this happen? What's gone wrong? So the idea that it's public and that it's like, yeah, this is what we're doing is just like, wow, like our society's come a long way from how this would have been reacted to in 1950, or that type of society. A CEO decides like, yeah, I'm gonna take all this.
Yeah. it's I mean, look, obviously the culture changed in the 1980s with the greed is good thing and all that. And even that's becoming a little bit distant now from many people's memory. And I think that, the show we recently did on the book Techno-Feudalism is another good example where I think there's a lot of ingredients that go into where we're at right now. And because Elon Musk himself is a product of this era, meaning, he did a startup which worked out. He was able to benefit from 0% financing and all that stuff and government grants early on and just all that, right? And it kind of exploded into this Tesla thing. And again, he's a sharp guy, right? I'm not going to take away from him. Then he got SpaceX and Starlink, and so he has this ability to command attention and to, especially in the financial world, bring confidence to investors that if they follow him, that something good can happen. I mean, he's built that aura around himself. I want to allude back to what you said is in the Gilded Age, because it's a very interesting point, because we're about 100 years, I'd say, since maybe the beginning of the decline of the last Gilded Age. If we can think of the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and Henry Flagler types that maybe from the late 1800s,
a little over
maybe 1920-ish.
Yeah, well, you had Teddy Roosevelt though in the early 1900s start to try to take antitrust to him, but then that took time though. But yeah,
exactly. That's what I'm saying. And then you had the Roaring '20s where they were still doing okay, and then the Depression happened, right? And I think
everybody recognized that the Depression was their fault. This is like, so nobody wanted to hear it anymore. As far as, you guys need all this money, right? Nah. But go ahead.
But I think that's where we're going to be headed, unfortunately, in the next probably decade or two, because if you look at what happened in the '30s, it's not like the Rockefellers or the Vanderbilts as a family, paid a price in any way. They were still extremely wealthy compared to the rest of the population. It's the rest of the population that paid the price. And I think the same thing will happen in this time, which is the people like the Elon Musks and other gilded people of our age, if I can say it that way, because of these imbalances and the things that you mentioned, which take a long time to really get in your brain. I mean, like you said about the 50s and the New Deal. I mean, in some respects, one has to go and really study that and understand that concept of a 90% tax rate. In one sense, sounds very let me see this word, confiscatory, and very aggressive from the state.
What it
but to your
is
point,
a salary cap.
but that's what I'm saying. But the understanding that then that would prevent someone like Musk of wanting to do something like this, right? Maybe he would take a smaller amount for a longer period of time, stretched out over years, which would then allow a company hypothetically like Tesla to have more money in its coffers to either do more research and development, or hire more people, or raise current people's salaries, or give a dividend to shareholders, because that would be nice on some of these Magnificent Seven companies if shareholders could just get a dividend. What if they paid $50 billion in dividends to existing shareholders? So my point is just saying that I think your example is great. The problem is that most of us in our society today can't appreciate it, because it takes a lot to go look and learn at all this stuff and realize, the way money flows in a system and kind of the velocity of money actually is determined by things like tax policy and the legislative process of an organization like the Congress. Yeah. And so with today's Congress and today's Gilded Age and the ability to lobby, I'm not confident this is going to get changed.
Well, presumably it can't go forever. I mean, the biggest difference now is this kind of endless borrowing that we see now from a government standpoint. Like, they're not even trying to do anything but borrow forever, so to speak. So that allows you to continue this kind of gilded thing longer than it would naturally go. Like it would have broken 2008, excuse me, if it wasn't for the level of borrowing that happened. One of the things that was noticed, and again, this is what stood out to me about it. You said, the Rockefellers and whatever, they stayed on top. But see, what they learned, they did change. But what they learned is that they didn't flaunt it like they did in the early 20th century, early 1900s. And so that, to me, again, that's what stood out about this, is like, it's like he's flaunting it. And
that's the old money versus new money. You know what I mean?
Well, some of it is, but some of it's also just it's the nature of society now. What would someone consider to be acceptable now? So to me, it's just interesting. It's just interesting to me. Like, again, I don't have a dog in that fight. Like, if he's gonna pay himself that much and the shareholders say it's okay, then knock yourself out. But to me, I just see that the commentary, or the stuff that comes to my mind, is the commentary on what it means for Tesla. Like, okay, well, what's happening there? And then again, what's happening in our society on that? Because and we're going to talk about it right now. There are people that are fascinated on all these, or like fixated on all these like issues that may be like completely fabricated, and getting so riled up about this stuff. And it's like, there's other stuff that's happening that directly affects people's quality of life, and nobody's concerned about it at all, and it's actually real, So to me, like that
stuff's not fun. I'd rather
it doesn't get your passions going. Apparently,
I'd rather be upset about Taylor Swift telling people to vote. That it really gets me upset. So, but no, I think we can close this topic up from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this topic. Please join us for our second topic today, and we'll talk to you then.